Welcome to the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast with Vicki Noethling. You are about to discover impactful lessons that help you grow as an individual, grow your confidence, and find the positive and good within you, so you powerfully and authentically become the best version of yourself. Be sure you visit our website at www.findyourleadershipconfidence.com. While you're there, subscribe to us via your favorite network. Now tune in, get ready, and enjoy the journey of emerging as a leader of exception in the 21st century.
Welcome, everyone, to the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast. I'm your host, Vicki Noethling, coming to you from Roswell, Georgia. The goal of this podcast is to bring topics and guests that will empower you to become that confident leader and take your business and your life to the next level. Today, I am very pleased to have as my guest, Joel Perez. And let me talk to you about Dr. Perez. Dr. Joel Perez is an executive and leadership coach, speaker, and consultant, passionate about helping leaders and organizations achieve their goals and develop a posture of cultural humility so that they can have an impact and create the culture they desire. He owns Apoyo Coaching and Consulting, a professional certified coach with an International Coach Federation certification. He specializes in career transitions, identity conscious leadership coaching, and coaching professionals who want to develop more of a cultural humility. He has a certification in MBTI, is a qualified administrator for the International Development or Intercultural, I'll get it right, Intercultural Development Inventory, and that's IDI, is a Gallup Strengths certified coach, and is a certified coach through the Academy of Creative Coaching. He has over 20 years of experience in higher education, serving in various key leadership roles. His book, Dear White Leader, How to Achieve Organizational Excellence Through Cultural Humility, is focused on helping leaders develop their cultural humility for individual, organizational, and community change. He earned his doctorate in higher education administration at Claremont Graduate University. We're going to talk about a topic I love to talk about, and that's building trust and safe spaces for vulnerable leadership. Please join me in welcoming my guest, Dr. Joel Perez. Love your background. Love it.
Mm-hmm.
So needed in this diverse world we live in. And I think, one of the gifts, I always say, even though COVID and pandemic were filled with lots of sorrow and sadness, it gave us so many gifts because, first of all, it gave us the gift of time.
Mm-hmm.
And in that time, a lot of us started to reflect on our lives and what we needed to maybe change. So I think what you are doing is quite timely.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be interviewed by you and looking forward to this conversation.
Awesome. I always start with two easy questions. If you've seen my podcast, The first is, where do you live? Where do you call home?
Yeah. So I am based in Los Angeles, California, born and raised here, but did live in Oregon for 7 years and Washington State for 2 years before moving back to the Los Angeles area.
Well, I know after this podcast, or when this podcast goes out, the issues there right now with the fires will hopefully be gone. But our thoughts and prayers are for you and all my dear friends that live in that Los Angeles, California area.
Yes, thank you. Oh.
So let's talk about this journey. You have a PhD now. You have extensive background in education and leadership and coaching. But you didn't start out there.
No. I did
So
not.
talk about that journey and the paths that led you to do what you do today, and even highlighting any of those stopping points, pivots that you had to take that really changed the direction of where you are and who you are.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the question. So, as I said, I was born and raised in Los Angeles. I'm a son of immigrants who immigrated from Mexico in the late 50s. Met in Los Angeles, fell in love, and I'm the youngest of three boys. Spanish was my first language. Grew up in a predominantly Latino neighborhood, although initially it was not that way. We had a lot of white neighbors, and at the time, we didn't have the language or the term white flight was occurring. So a lot of those folks were moving away, and then were replaced by people that shared my identities, primarily Mexican American. And that shaped my upbringing. And actually, my high school was predominantly Latino Mexican, and very, very few non-Latino families, or I should say students, were there and present. And yeah, I actually didn't know much about college until my freshman year of high school, which is very, very different than the way my
Yeah.
kids are being raised. And decided to apply to a college and ended up going there, and first generation college student and eventually first generation college graduate, and was was in the area, or I should say the college was in the area, and not too close but not too far from the
Hmm.
LA uprising that happened in the early
Oh,
90s. and
yeah.
and so I share about that in my book, Dear White Leader, and how that was a watershed moment for me
Mm.
in wanting to get involved in bridging across differences. And so I started to take on leadership roles in college, and really trying to navigate hard conversations and advocate for change, particularly from those of us from minoritized communities.
Yeah.
And that really led me to want to work in higher education. And so that led to me pursuing a master's in higher education, and then eventually a PhD in higher education. So I worked in higher ed over 20 plus years, serving in various roles. Started off as a hall director, so I lived on campus, um, which a lot of funny stories about that.
I'll bet.
And yeah, and then I became eventually a vice president, dean of students at a small private liberal arts college in Southern California. And um, the first pivot happened. I should say, well, the major pivot happened is when a new executive leader gets hired, a president of a college or CEO. There was a lot of shuffling.
Hmm.
That person wanted to bring in their own team, and which is totally their right to be able to do that. And but it was a little bit of a shock to my system,
Hmm.
and wanted to stay in higher ed, but those doors didn't open at the time. We love our kids' schools; they love their schools. We didn't want to move outside of the Los Angeles area.
Yeah.
And so I decided to pivot and had always wanted to coach people, mainly because I had mentored a lot of people in my life and had been mentored by a lot of people. And so I wanted to give back. And so I was like, oh, this coaching thing looks interesting. And initially it was going to be a side hustle. I was going to do it when I retired. But I had to pivot and scale quickly. And so I started taking on clients so I could move towards credentialing. And most of my clients were at the time, and some of which are still with me, are higher ed administrators. So I do a lot of work with higher ed people, people who work in higher education, administrators, some faculty across the country. And so that's what led me to coaching. That's what led me to launch Apoyo Coaching and Consulting. Apoyo stands for support for in Spanish. So my
Mm.
line is I listen, bring clarity, provide support. Apoyo Coaching and Consulting. And
Nice.
so it's been great. And in that process, as coaching people, particularly those that identify as white, I started recognizing some of the challenges they were experiencing, particularly in leading diverse teams. And so at the time I have and had at that point a signature coaching program called Cultural Humility Coaching. And in the process of coaching white leaders, I realized there's a book here. And I think there's a message to share broadly about what developing a posture of cultural humility looks like, and the
Mm.
impact it can have on leading inclusive organizations with a deep sense of belonging, or organizations that want to create a deep sense of belonging. And so that got me on the book writing journey. And I went to idea to draft in 6 months, and that's a whole other podcast probably
I
about
bet.
books and how
Yeah.
to write books. But that's led me to where I am today. And so I do a lot of executive and leadership coaching in the nonprofit higher ed space, some corporate clients, and then I do a lot of training and development using a cultural humility framework to help organizations think about how do we create a more inclusive organization so all of our leaders can thrive no matter what their salient identities might be or how they
Mm.
identify. And so that's led me here. My wife and I have been married over 28 years. We have 4 kids, 4 biracial children, ages 13 to 20, and they all live at home. And that's as chaotic as that sounds, which brings a lot of funny stories, and
Yeah, I
because we're
bet.
all in a, we're in a tight space. But that's what led me to coaching, and that's where I am today. And the book has opened up a lot of doors, a lot of good conversations with leaders from all different type of ethnic groups, cultural groups, socioeconomic groups. But the pivot came in 2019,
Well,
professionally,
just
and I thought I was
just
going to
at
be in high.
COVID.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right at the start of, right at the beginning, before COVID happened, and I launched my business right at the start of the pandemic.
Wow.
And so, but it's been quite a journey, and one that's been very, at the time, wasn't necessarily good, feeling good about it. But now looking back, it's been a great journey and has propelled me to be able to really think about change in a way that I think organizations should really think about it if they're going to thrive and sustain or or have sustainable businesses.
So let's stay there for a little bit and talk about the concept of a identity conscious
Mhm,
leadership and how it empowers the leaders to navigate. I mean, we have such a diverse
mhm,
environment today, and then you throw in the diversity is across the globe in the remote teams that now
mhm.
have become a reality. So talk about that.
Yeah, yeah. So I call it identity conscious leadership coaching. So a lot of my clients come to me because they know that I understand their story, whether that is someone
Yeah.
who identifies as Black, Latino, Asian, LGBTQ, meaning that or identify as female, um, because I understand what it means or what it is like to be in a community where they're not part of the dominant cultural group of that organization. And they don't have to explain themselves to me. And so I get them, if you want to use that term. And I center the coaching on identity. So I don't ignore their identities. And I also help them acknowledge that maybe their identities might be playing a role of how they're experiencing the organization or the manager. Or when I work
Mm.
with people from that identify as white, how their identities might create power differentials with people they're leading who may not be in that same identity group, particularly those from a more historically underrepresented group within their organization. And
Mhm.
so we work on what does it mean to create a sense of belonging, an inclusive team, so that their team members feel like they can connect with that person, that they can connect with that person, that that person understands and willing to listen to them and help them grow in their positions so that they can thrive in the organizations. But it's always centered on identity. I don't ignore people's identities. Now, if they don't want to talk about it, that's fine. We move on.
Yeah.
But 9 out of 10 times, someone will say, yes, that is impacting the
Yeah.
way I'm experiencing this organization or the microaggression that just happened. And I need help kind of navigating that, particularly if it's if they need to confront a manager or a leader within the organization about something they said or did. And so always centering identity which I feel is really important and sometimes overlooked in the coaching world. So I actually offer a coaching program for coaches and consultants that want to get better at coaching and consulting cross-culturally so that they
Mhm.
can feel more confident in how they show up in spaces where they know that a majority of the organization is from a underrepresented community or does work in an a predominantly underrepresented community so that they can be good people and do their work well.
Mhm. And I think that's really one of the important things is we're all just people. But when I started in management way back in the I mean, was in corporate over 40 years, and it was one size fits all,
Mhm.
my way or the highway, and didn't take into account the diversity and that
Yeah.
cultural humility that you were talking about. And it was difficult to really navigate because it was so foreign to what I felt whenever I was trying to lead people.
Mhm.
And as you said, I had one employee who I could see that they were struggling, and I wanted to know a little bit about them because I knew
Mhm.
they had what it took
Mhm.
to do their job and to really be wonderful. And I knew there had to have been something, and they were very private. And so
Mhm.
how I was able to just build trust until I could approach that. And then when my upper management was like, well, she should be, if she doesn't want to be a supervisor, then she should, we should just move on. It's like, no, it's just not the right time.
Mhm.
There are things going on in her personal life that we have to respect. And
Yeah.
that kind of just led me to just care more about the people than the seat that they filled.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Yeah, that brings up an example. So I was working with an executive director who identifies as white and female, and she wanted, so one of the characteristics of cultural humility is this idea around self-awareness and self-critique, that you got to get clear about who you are, but it's not just about who you are, but who the other people are around you. So other awareness, developing other awareness. And so we were doing work. I was coaching her, and she's like, Joel, I really want to get to know my team, but they're not really open to sharing about themselves. And I said, she's like, and I just can't go around asking people, hey, what are your identities? And I said, yeah, you don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Don't do that. Because that is personal space, and you can't force
Mhm.
people to share about
No,
themselves, nor
no.
should you. But where we landed on as we coached is, I said, are there things that you think you can do to help people feel more comfortable to share about themselves? So we kind of sat in silence for a minute, and she's like, "Oh, maybe I can share more about myself." And I said, "Yes." I said,
Yeah.
"That's it. You got to model it. So if you want to see it in people,
Yeah.
you have to model it so that people feel more comfortable. While if Joel's sharing more about himself, maybe it's okay for me to share more about myself." And they may not want to go deep, but at least you get to know them better so that they feel appreciated, they feel like they belong, that they don't have to hide their identities for fear of, for some type of fear that they may be experiencing if they
Hmm.
or think something will happen to them if they share more about who they are.
Yeah.
Now, another thing to think about, if people don't want to share more about their identities or who they are, is there something in the DNA of the organization that may be creating that
Yeah.
feeling? And there may not
Hmm.
be, but there might be.
Hmm.
And so that's why I think it's important also for organizations to really think about, how do we create change that is sustainable, that isn't just about hiring a person or starting a program, but are there things that we can do so we embed the culture of belonging we're trying to create within the organization so it
Yeah.
just becomes part of our DNA? And that's the hard work, that's the heavy lift, but I think it's
Hmm.
important. But it starts with you, the leader, around this idea of self-awareness and self-critique.
So I just wanted to mention if you could sit up a little bit more and so we can see that shirt. And I
Yeah.
always talk about, with confidence, you first have to be curious and
Hmm.
sometimes you have to be courageous. And that
Hmm.
often will lead to that confidence. So being curious,
Hmm.
it, I, th- I think whenever we're talking about strategies for transitioning to leadership roles, you have to have the confidence and clarity and
Hmm.
authenticity, but I think you have to be curious too.
Yes. Yeah. Hmm. Yes.
So, what would some strategies that you would recommend to leaders to find that clarity and that confidence and authenticity? Don't I always struggled. My very first job was in an accounting firm and I was administrative. And I saw all the staff accountants trying to be just like the managing partner, drank what
Hmm.
he drank. Everybody all of a sudden
Hmm.
went from beer to scotch and things.
Hmm.
And it was like, but you were losing your identity by
Yeah.
trying to be somebody, putting on that mask, answering in the way you thought that that person wanted you to answer without
Hmm.
being creative or challenging or
Hmm.
curious.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, I always start with going back, and not just the culture humility piece of self-awareness, but to be a leader, to be an exceptional leader, you have to be clear about who you are and what
Mm,
your values are, so that you know who you are. And
right.
once you get to know who you are, then it's easier to develop the confidence because you know what drives you, right? And so if you realize, oh no, I really value being my own person, or I really value family, or I really value trust, teamwork, and if that's not happening in the organization, and I coach executives about around this and getting
Hmm.
clear on your values, particularly young professionals, is getting clear on your values, your guiding values, to make sure you are in that there's congruence within the
Mm,
job you have and the
right.
organization. Because if you're incongruent, or if there's a disconnect, it might mean having a conversation of like asking yourself, is this the right place for me? Right.
Mm,
But it starts with self-awareness, which then leads to then leading with confidence and clarity, right? And we've all worked in organizations where, or for people who aren't clear about who they are,
oh,
how
yeah.
they lead. And so I do this workshop for higher ed leaders who are getting ready for a job transition. And we talk about leading with clarity, to being clear. When you say you're collaborative, that's awesome. That's great. You said that in an interview. I think everyone should be collaborative. But what do you mean by collaboration? And what are examples of when you cannot be collaborative?
Mm,
Because if things happen in an organization or in a particular context or scenario as a leader, you may not always be able to be collaborative. But
right.
if people don't know what those examples are, then they will just make stuff up about you
Mm,
without
mm,
you realizing that that's what's happening. That's where the trust starts to erode,
mhm,
right? And so it's getting clear, leading with clarity, and getting clear about who you are and the identities you hold and how they may be showing up within the way, how you lead, particularly if you're
mhm,
leading a diverse team, and if you're working in a diverse organization. Because again, it's getting clear about who you are, how you lead, the getting culturally self-aware, because that'll influence how you lead and how you communicate,
mhm,
right? There are some people groups that find it offensive if you look if you look directly into people's eyes, right? You give
mhm,
direct eye contact. Well, if
mhm,
you don't know that as a leader, and then you may say, well, Joel's not confident because he's not looking people in the eyes. Well, maybe Joel comes from an indigenous community where that is a sign of disrespect, right? And so you have to get to know who you are, and then getting to know the people around you and those that you lead, so that you can help them, again, going back to helping them thrive and creating that culture of belonging, so that they feel connected to the organization and connected to you as the leader.
yeah, and that's interesting point you made. Used to be, in the 70s and 80s, whenever anybody was going to be transferred overseas for a special assignment or whatnot,
Hmm.
they were to understand and learn about the culture before they
Hmm.
went there, so they wouldn't have a misstep like
Right.
that.
Hmm.
Well, the culture, this world is now
Yes.
no borders, right? And
Hmm. Hmm.
so one of the things that I don't think that we teach in high school, college, or anywhere is understanding
Hmm.
those different cultural diversities that could be disrespectful
Yes. Hmm.
or taken in the wrong way.
Hmm. Hmm.
But that's the world that we live in.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where the curiosity comes in, right? So
Mm-hmm.
developing the ability to be deeply curious. And that comes with asking questions, asking open-ended questions, being genuine, seeking to really I say this in the book, seeking to understand versus seeking to convince,
Yes.
right?
Mm.
Which is a huge, huge problem in our society today and in our country. We don't really sit with people to really fully understand their perspective on either side, which creates polarization and divide. And
Mm-hmm.
what I tell people when I lead workshops, facilitate workshops, is I'm not asking you, I'm not telling you have to change your values or beliefs, but can you be open to a conversation where you may be able to leave a conversation with a better understanding of that other person, which which will help you just have a better understanding. And again, you may not agree, and it's not your role to convince the other person that they're wrong and you're right. And that's what gets in the way of us really listening to each other. Right. And so that's why I think having this posture of cultural humility is extremely important in leadership and in navigating the complexity that comes with leading diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging work and creating the inclusive organizations that we know we need to create so that we retain our talent and that we become profitable.
Yeah.
Right. Because as you said, the culture has changed around us. There's different cultural groups that are around us, the businesses we have. We have to get better at this work.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not about ideology, it's about being good and just being good people.
Yeah.
And that ultimately that helps.
And really, the more that everyone understands that, I think the less conflict there will be. Because if I
Mm.
understand that you may have a different opinion than me, and whether I agree with that after you've talked with me or not, at least be open to the conversation. But it doesn't mean for either party that you have to change your ways. You have to,
Yeah, yeah,
it's like agree to disagree type of thing. But no harm, no foul. It doesn't impact your
yeah.
worths,
I,
I
I,
guess.
I think the important thing, or one of the important things is to see the value in everyone
Hmm.
and to and by doing that, it means humanizing people, right? So
Yeah.
there's an exercise that I've read about that people do is ask yourself, in this case, I would say, does Vicky like carrots or broccoli? I don't need to ask her that question, but if I start to ask questions like decaf or caffeine, I start to humanize Vicky and that she's a person. It's not about political affiliation or ideologies. It's about Vicky as the person, right? And
Hmm.
so if you can get in the habit of asking yourself that question before you engage in a conversation, you will start seeing the other person, or hopefully you start seeing the person as a human
Hmm.
and as a whatever faith system you may have, a creature of that particular faith system, right?
Hmm.
And that's going to help. Now, it takes time. You can't you
Yeah.
do it again. It starts with you. I say in the book, it starts with you,
Hmm.
goes into your organization, and ultimately your community. And by community, I mean your family, your faith community, the volunteer organization you volunteer at, the pickleball club you're a part of, the tennis group you're a part of, the gaming group you're a part of. It's gonna bleed into that so that you model this posture for people, and
Yeah.
that I believe our society would be better than it is today. But it starts with you,
Yeah.
the leader, and taking on this work, which is not easy work to do.
No. But nobody said being a leader was easy.
No, no, and it's not, right? We will make mistakes.
That's exactly
I
right.
tell my clients that we're all going to make mistakes. It's what you do with those mistakes, and
Mhm.
having that growth mindset, or what Carol Dweck talks about, having a growth mindset, so that you're
Yeah.
learning from your mistakes and not just shutting down.
Oh, so true.
Hmm.
Well, time has flown by. We could talk
Yeah.
and talk, but this has
Hmm.
been awesome. If
Oh,
you
thank
out
you.
there really enjoyed this and want to know more, you see the book behind him.
Hmm.
We'll share a slide that has another image of that book to remind you, but also his contact information so that you might reach out and have further conversations directly with Dr. Perez. So I'm
Oh,
going to share my slide. If you are
sure.
just listening, you know you should go and grab a paper and pencil right quick to be able to write the website down, but it will be in my YouTube channel, Vicki Noethling. So please subscribe, as well as my findyourleadershipconfidence.com website. All right, so that website is apoyocoaching.com. It's apoyocoaching.com. There's that book image for you, Dear White Leader. And Facebook is Joel Perez, DP, like David Paul. And
Mhm.
then LinkedIn is Joel Perez, PhD, because he's a doctor, people.
Yes, yeah.
I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Perez to be able to tell you what you can find when you go to his website. He has links to things that might help you, assessments, tools, as well as what he puts out there on Facebook and LinkedIn that may help you as well, and how often. So if you DM'd him, you'd kind of expect how quickly you'd get a response. So, Dr.
Yeah.
Perez, it's all yours.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so apoyocoaching.com is my business website, which has information about my coaching, signature coaching programs, as well as the consulting that I do in creating a culture of belonging and a posture of cultural humility. The best place to find me, where I post a lot, is LinkedIn. I always joke that I eat, breathe, and bleed LinkedIn. And so if you were to direct message me on LinkedIn, I'm on there pretty much a good portion of the day, so I would respond in a timely manner. And so on the website, I also have some videos of talking about my signature coaching programs, as well as, when I've keynoted at a conference. So if that's something you're interested in looking at or taking a look at, if you want to find out more about the book, dearwhiteleader.com, and you could actually download the first chapter of the book. So if you want to read it first, I will say this because I think it's important to say, yes, the title can be off-putting to some. I have a target audience. It is white leaders that want to get better at leading diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, or create an inclusive organization, but don't know where to start or are feeling
Mhm.
stuck. And if you've ever written a book, you know that if you don't have an audience, you have no audience. And so in my case, it was white leaders, but every concept of the book is applicable to any leader, no matter what identity you
Mhm.
hold, or whatever your salient identities might be. And so I just want to name that up front, because I know people sometimes like, well, that kind of, I don't know about that book. But then once people start reading it and you'll see the reviews, it'll be like,
Yeah.
oh, people really engage with the content.
Yeah.
So dearwhiteleader.com if you want to know more about the book. If you want to know more about Upboil Coaching, upboilcoaching.com. And I also post quite a bit on LinkedIn, so you can see a lot of what I do on my LinkedIn feed. So thank you.
Fantastic. Yeah, you want to make sure you connect with him on LinkedIn. He has a lot of good stuff out there. Thank you again so much for being a wonderful guest. I
Thank you for
love the
having me.
conversation. And as I said at the beginning, I think it's a conversation that, needs to be had in all of the organizations out there, because we do have diverse groups. Look around the room, and there are fewer blonde hair, blue-eyed people, at a lot of the corporations, and we all have to work together and remember that we are all people, and we all want to do well, and to do so, we need to respect and find out a way to communicate clearly and be curious.
Yeah.
but
DQ.
not judgmental.
Yes. Ted Lasso. You gotta love Ted Lasso.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. All right. So, everybody, you know how I always end. Life is a journey, and it's up to you to enjoy the ride. This is Vicki Noethling signing off.
Thank you for tuning into the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast with Vicki Noethling, where we share impactful lessons that help you grow as an individual, grow your confidence, and find the positive and good within you so you powerfully and authentically become the best version of yourself. Remember to visit our website at www.findyourleadershipconfidence.com and enjoy even more great episodes like this one. Again, while you're here, subscribe to us via your favorite network. We look forward to seeing you next time on the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast.